I have no idea who that was he was introducing, but I'll try to live up to it. Good morning. Talking to them. Feels good, doesn't it? You know that expression about hitting yourself in the head with a hammer because it feels so good when you stop? When I began to put this little speech together, I started thinking about what I wanted to say to you, and I began to think about what I don't want to say to you. I don't want to use the normal platitudes. You know, this is not the end, this is the beginning, and like Spider-Man with great responsibility and great power and all that kind of stuff. We're not going to do that. Instead, what I want to do is I want to tell you a story. In a typical year, I travel in my job to about 70 different countries. It's like a very bad habit. And my time is spent in two different parts of the world. I spend a lot of time in countries like this one, the first world, where companies tend to gain competitive advantage in very small little leaps. You don't get giant leaps in a fully developed world like this. I mean, you might be Apple and you might get a gigantic leap of sort of greatness when you introduce something like the iPad, but 12 femtoseconds later, everybody has an iPad. It doesn't do you a lot of good for very long. The other part of the world that I work in, which is quite interesting, is the developing world. I spend a lot of time in Africa and Southeast Asia and Latin America and parts of the world where, from my perspective, technology is being introduced for the very first time. Quite often I will get a call from a group of people, as I recently did in northern South Africa, 3 tribal groups who came to me and they said, look, we want to get our children connected to the internet. We don't know what the internet is, but we think they need to be connected to it. We have this much money. What do we do? And so my job is to help them get through those sort of ragged waters as they make their way to where they're trying to get. The thing I love about it is that it gives me an opportunity to see once again what it is that technology can really do. You know, technology is great, except technology isn't about technology. Technology is about connecting people to opportunity and possibility, and in many cases, to hope. And that hope often comes from the ability to create a vision, a sense of where you're going, that causes them to want to cling to it, to move forward. My words to you are about asking you to do this for everyone that you encounter as you go forward. Last year, I was asked by 2 of my clients, Bell Laboratories down in New Jersey and the World Economic Forum, to undertake a study to look at the impact that mobile telephony has when you introduce it into a part of the world that has never had it before. What we did was we visited many of the so-called bottom-of-the-pyramid countries, countries whose economies are just developing to the point that they're actually starting to have an impact on the global economy. We visited countries like Bangladesh, and countries like Myanmar, and countries like Ghana, and parts of Congo, and parts of Pakistan, and so on. And what we came away with was an amazing understanding of what could be, and I want to share it with you because I want to light a fire here a little bit. What we looked at was the impact that telephones have when they are introduced into a country for the first time. Not the internet, not broadband, merely mobile telephony and the ability to send a text message. And here's what we learned. If you can raise the penetration of mobile telephony in a country by as little as 10%, you raise the gross domestic product of that country by 1%. Now let me translate that for you. What that translates into is $160 billion a year added to the global economy. It translates into 160,000 children in each one of those countries that suddenly have access to education, something that would otherwise be denied them. And it means that you extend the life expectancy in those countries by 15 months, simply because you introduced mobile telephony. We talked to a young woman named Kapila Ben, who lives in Bangladesh. She sells lilies in public markets. Her day consists of picking the lilies in the morning, and then while she's picking the lilies, she figures out where she wants to go. But she doesn't really know where she wants to sell them because there are public markets that move around the city where she lives. So she spends a great deal of her time trying to find the best market, which means she misses out on many of these opportunities that present themselves to her. And then the World Economic Forum gave her a mobile telephone. And now while she's actually harvesting the flowers, at the same time, she is making phone calls to find out where the markets are, and she regains 4 hours every day when she's selling, where otherwise she would have been walking around the city trying to find the market. Her revenue has tripled as a consequence of having that telephone. We found an application in Pakistan where women who are often denied education beyond a certain point in that country are being taught to read because they're being sent text messages every day that teach them how to read, which gives them access to job opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have. We found an application in Ghana where women who are expecting their first babies are sent text messages every day that teach them prenatal care instructions so that they know what to expect as they approach the day when their children are going to be born. Now, why am I telling you this? I mean, it's kind of fun. It's interesting. It's good stuff. It shows you that technology is important. But I'm telling you this because by telling you this story, I have created a sense in your minds, I hope, of something that could be. That is this vision of a different status quo that was created by something as simple as introducing mobile telephony into a part of the world that didn't have it before. And my friends, this is what leadership is about. Presumably one of the reasons you came to this school, that you went through this program, was to, among other things, develop your leadership skills, to become better leaders. Let me tell you what leadership is about from the perspective that I have doing this bizarre job that I do. Leadership isn't about how big your organization is. It's not about whether you have a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. It's not about whether you have a brass plaque on the door. In fact, it's not about whether you have a door. Leadership is about the ability to create a vision of a desirable future that is so powerful and so compelling that everyone around you, and when I say everyone, I mean your colleagues, your peers, your subordinates, your bosses, your suppliers, your buyers, even your competitors look at your vision and they say, oh baby, how do I help you achieve that? I want to be part of that vision. That's what leadership is about. Now, it isn't easy. It takes effort, and it takes time, and it takes a commitment to see where you want to go and to get there. There's a wonderful quote that I stole from a cubicle wall many years ago. I can't attribute it. I have no idea who wrote it, but I love it, so I'm going to share it with you. It says, recognize that every out front maneuver you make is going to be lonely and a little bit frightening. If you're entirely comfortable, then you're not far enough ahead to do any good. That warm sense of everything going well is nothing more than the body temperature at the center of the herd. You can't lead from the center of the herd. You got to be out there a little bit. You got to be ahead of the pack. I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to see one of my personal heroes give a talk. I was giving a keynote for one of my clients in Las Vegas, and as I was walking to the room, I noticed passing the room before mine that he was going to be there. So I thought I'll get out of my thing a little bit early and rush over and see if I can sneak into the room to hear him speak. I didn't have to sneak. I could have driven a Humvee into the room. There were 2,500 people in this conference room. Oddly enough, none of them were sitting. They were all standing. There were no chairs to be seen. His name is Gordon McKenzie. Some of you may know the name. He wrote what I believe to be the single best book on leadership and management ever written. It's called Orbiting the Giant Hairball, a corporate fool's guide to surviving with grace. If you haven't read it, read it. Gordon stood at the front of the room. He's a very dynamic speaker. He's waving his arms around. All these people are standing watching this madman as he struts up and down the stage. And at one point, in a fit of excitement, he knocked a water glass off of the top of the podium and very apologetically said, excuse me, let me go call facilities so we can get this cleaned up. Made a phone call. Couple came in, young couple came in, cleaned it up. He apologized to them and they left. And he said, you know, this is the end of my speech, but let me give you a sense of just how much power you have if you learn to think about the world a little differently than you currently do. He said, I'd like every one of you reach into your pockets, your purses, and pull out a bill, $1, $5, $10, $20, whatever you want. Just pull it out, hold it up in the air. So everybody sort of awkwardly dug around and found a bill, and magically the room is transformed into a summer forest. And he said, now I'm going to count to 3, and when I say 3, I want you to release the bill and just let it float to the ground. And magically it was transformed into Vermont in October. And everyone is now standing knee-deep in money. Okay, ankle-deep in money. They're all looking around kind of embarrassed, you know, and he said, so we've got kind of a decision to make, don't we? Everybody sort of laughed. He said, I could count to 3 and say, everybody bend over and pick up a bill equal to the one you dropped. We're all civilized, educated people here. We could do this without too many people getting hurt. He said, or I could count to 3 and just ask everyone to bend over and pick up as much money as you possibly can. We're not going to do that. Do we have any other options? No one said anything. They all sort of looked at each other, kind of embarrassed. He said, "We could leave it for the cleaning crew." And that's what they did. He said, "When I knocked that glass of water over earlier, I did that on purpose. And the reason I did it on purpose was because I had the opportunity to talk to the young couple that came in and cleaned up after me a few minutes ago. Talked to them earlier today. They are citizens of the United States, moved here 12 years ago from El Salvador. They have 3 children in college. They have 2 children who are twins, who are both in their 2nd year at Harvard Medical School. They have 1 student who is a graduate PhD student at Yale University in engineering. They're working 4 jobs to keep them in school. Shall we leave it for the cleaning crew?" Well, you can imagine what the room did. It erupted. And he said, "All right, I'll tell you what, why don't you just leave the money and everybody walk over to the other half of the room where no one is standing." And they all did, as you can imagine, hooting and hollering and making all kinds of racket. He said, "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" And they, again, cheered and yelled, and he said, "Very good." And he knocked the water glass over again. Now you can imagine what happened when he called the people back in once again to clean up after him. Now they had a second mess to deal with. You see, Gordon knew how to motivate people. He knew how to get people to consider that there might be a second or third or fourth way to approach a problem. He knew how to get those people in that room to collaborate and to essentially become and be leaders. And that is effectively what happened. There's a movie that came out a few years ago called The American President with Michael Douglas, who plays the president, Michael J. Fox, who plays his chief of staff. And there's a scene in the movie where the 2 of them are having a pretty heated argument about presidential behavior and decorum. And the conversation goes like this. Michael J. Fox, the chief of staff, says, "People want leadership, Mr. President. And in the absence of genuine leadership, they'll listen to anyone who steps up to the podium. They're so thirsty for it, they'll crawl through the desert toward a mirage. And when they see that there's no water, they'll drink the sand." And the president responds. He says, "Lewis, we have had presidents who were beloved, but who couldn't find a coherent sentence with 2 hands and a flashlight." He says, "People don't drink the sand because they're thirsty. They drink the sand because they don't know the difference." My request to you is to learn how to show them the difference. Thank you very much.